In this edition of Fix the Flick, we'll be looking at 2016's Rogue One. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this one. The eighth movie in the Star Wars canon had a much different tone than its predecessors. Rogue One showed us Imperial officers that truly believed they were cleaning up the galaxy, and rebels that were less than squeaky clean. Making things a little grittier was a new and interesting direction to take the first Star Wars standalone film. And throwing in a little moral ambiguity really helped Rogue One stand out from the other Star Wars movies. Which is really ironic considering Rogue One had to rely so heavily on Star Wars canon to make any sense at all. A lot of other people have touched on this, so I'll be brief. Just ask yourself, would Rogue One have made any sense if you hadn't already seen A New Hope? Now, I know the odds of finding someone who doesn't already know Star Wars is pretty slim, but it's not much of a standalone film if the film doesn't stand alone. So, in this version, we're getting rid of a lot of fan service, and unfortunately that means no Death Star and no Darth Vader. See, I told you you'd hate me. Because a story about getting plans to defeat a superweapon that we never see defeated doesn't make for a satisfying ending, and everything that explains who Vader isn't in this movie. So, no matter how mind-blowingly awesome it was, we have to get rid of Darth killing a bunch of rebel scum. And speaking of rebel scum, for a movie that had a blank check to go ahead and kill its whole cast, we didn't really know or care about any of them. Most of them were just cardboard cutouts that had a gimmick, like nervous guy with goggles or blind not Jedi. Honestly, does anybody even know this guy's name? If Rogue One hadn't relied on fan service to tell its story, and if it had leaned into the moral gray areas that it had created, we would have had a Star Wars movie the likes of which we had never seen before. So, with that in mind, let's try to fix Rogue One. Seriously, please don't hate me for this. We start off with Jyn's flashback, and almost everything is the same, except that her mom is actually dead, and didn't let herself get killed for no reason.
You will never win.
Do it.
Because if Lyra is dead, then we see that Krennic is actually sorry for Galen's loss. This plays into the moral gray areas that work so well. Imperials can be people too. And since the Death Star isn't in this version, Krennic is an Imperial spy, which is a lot more intimidating than a whiny working stiff dealing with office politics.
We stand here amidst my achievement, not yours!
He conscripts Galen for his code-breaking skills, and Jyn watches the whole conversation, but can't hear what they're saying. So, when she sees Galen just going off with Krennic, she actually has a reason to grow up not liking her father. She eventually gets picked up by Saw Gerrera, and we go to credits. On Wavani, we see Jyn casing an Imperial officer who looks a lot like her, and pickpockets the officer's ID. She then tells a crooked smuggler that she's selling a shipment of Kessel spice. When he points out that only the Empire has access to the valuable narcotic, she flashes the stolen officer's ID and tells him that she'll report that the rebels stole it, which convinces him to set up a meeting. The theatrical version had Jyn starting off in prison, which didn't illustrate anything about her, and getting rescued gave her no agency as a character.
You are being rescued. Please do not resist.
This scene shows us that Jyn is a street-smart, fast-talking hustler. That she's, well, a rogue. But under her charm, we get a sense that that isn't who she really is, which makes her a bit of a mystery. We also see that she gives no thought to the Empire or the Rebellion. In fact, she's using the conflict for her own profit. It's clear at the beginning of this story that Jyn Erso is only out for herself. From there, we go to Cassian, meeting directly with Bodhi instead of a contact. The opening of the original version jumped around a lot, and this helps to streamline things a bit. So, Cassian takes him to Mon Mothma, and Bodhi tells her that he was sent by Galen Erso, who's discovered the master files on all of the Empire's military projects. After hearing this, she orders Cassian to steal the files. In the original, Cassian started out as an interesting character because his morals were on the gray side. But after he shot one guy, he pretty much did a 180 and turned into a typical good guy for the rest of the movie.
You went up there to kill my father.
I had every chance to pull the trigger. But did I? Did I?
In this version, Cassian starts off as a no-nonsense, by-the-book soldier who says that he's not qualified for this kind of mission. Mon Mothma gets Bodhi to reluctantly agree to offer his knowledge on the Edu facility, but no more. Cassian then admits that he's no thief, to which Mon Mothma says that he should recruit someone who is. So Cassian, Bodhi, and K2SO leave to recruit Galen's daughter. From there, we're reintroduced to Krennic, who reports to his boss, Grand Moff Tarkin. When Tarkin showed up in the original and we only saw his reflection, that was really cool. And then he turned around and we all went, what? So no, in this scene Tarkin never turns around and he regards Krennic as a subordinate. Tarkin listens to his report about Bodhi's defection, then empowers Krennic to deal with it, because he's been given another project. See, that wasn't so hard. The fans get a little Death Star reference and the general audience has no required viewing. Back on Wobani, Cassian interrupts Jin's meeting with the smuggler and inadvertently reveals that Jin's shipment of spice was actually sand. The smuggler starts shooting and now we get a high-speed getaway. Once they've escaped, Jin pulls a blaster on Cassian and threatens to shoot him for losing her so much money. He manages to talk Jin out of it by telling her that her father risked his life to send them a message about her. Cassian plays Galen's message and we see the emotional plea he makes to his daughter.
Jin, my stardust. So much of my life has been wasted. I try to think of you only in the moments when I'm strong, because the pain of not having you with me, the pain of that loss is so overwhelming I risk failing even now. It's just so hard not to think of you. My stardust.
Jin shocks Cassian, however, when she just shrugs and asks, "Did you think I'd fall to my knees and weep?" Desperate, Cassian reveals that the Empire has nearly broken the Rebel Alliance, and getting the files might just save them and the galaxy. Jin insists that she doesn't care about his cause and that she doesn't care about her father. And again, we get the feeling that she's hiding her true feelings, because she ultimately does agree to help, albeit for a price. Cassian is disgusted by her response, but he has no choice. Jin tells him that if they're going to do this, they're going to need some help. They go to the Ring of Kafrene, and when Jin comes across Chirrut Imwe, we discover that they already know each other, and that Chirrut is a con man extraordinaire who makes money with petty cons like telling phony fortunes. It turns out that not only is Chirrut pretending to be blind, he's also pretending to be a guardian of the wills. We heard a lot about the Jedi and the Force in the original, but like a lot of things, they were never explained. So, by explaining his schemes, Chirrut gives a little background on the Force as well. Chirrut and Baze, yes, his name is Baze in case you were wondering, had a close relationship in the theatrical version, but the nature of their relationship was never fleshed out. So, in this version, they're brothers, and they bicker a little when Baze, a devout believer in the Force, chastises Chirrut once again for his blasphemy. When Jin offers them the Edu job, they're excited by how dangerous and impossible it's going to be. Once they accept, the crew is now complete, and Jin tells Cassian that they'll need perfect Imperial IDs and transport. Cassian reminds her that the rebels aren't really cooperating and that they'll need to think of something. Baze says he might have a solution, but Jin's not going to like it. From there, we go to Krennic blindsiding Bodhi's captain and revealing that he knows about Bodhi's defection. Krennic says that the Empire can't achieve peace if they don't have order, and they can't have order if they don't have control. So Krennic kills him, while forcing the captain's second-in-command to watch. Krennic then demands all of Bodhi's communications in order to see who he had been talking to. Our heroes arrive on Jedha and immediately encounter Imperial checkpoints and spot searches. The rebel pilots that were in the trailer but not in the movie walk by. We see people starving in the streets. And Jin especially is taken aback. Cassian tells her that a starving population is easier to control. On Wobani, we saw that the Imperial presence was fairly light, but it's clear that Jedha is fully under the Empire's control, and Jin sees just how much ground the Empire has gained. An Imperial convoy heads down their street, and suddenly the crew is caught in the middle of a raid. They help take out the convoy, But once the fight is over, we see that instead of kyber crystals, the desperate raiders are stealing food. Cassian says that this is what the rebellion is fighting against. Eventually, Baze brings them to Saw Gerrera. In this version, Jin was still raised by Saw, but instead of him dumping her, it's Jin that left Saw, because he was becoming too radical and she had lost hope that they could make a difference. When Jin mentions Saw's tactics, Cassian speaks up and says that he may be forced to work with thieves, but he refuses to work with terrorists. Saw says that is the reason why the Empire is winning, that the Alliance doesn't trust each other enough to risk everything in order to win. So they fight small battles just to survive, while the Empire slowly spreads across the galaxy. He then points out that his tactics have freed 12 worlds in 1 year. This forces Cassian to reconsider the Alliance's strategy, and makes Jin realize that the Empire isn't some unstoppable force. Saw asks Jin why she's helping the Alliance again, and she says that it's just for the money. Despite being unconvinced, Saw gets them IDs and an Imperial ship. And as they make final preparations for Edu, Saw pulls Jin aside and says that her father would be proud of what she's doing, and so is he, which suggests that he knows more about her motivation than she wants to admit. Meanwhile, Krennic combs through all of Bodhi's communications. Eventually, he finds several messages to and from Galen Erso. They're coded, but they're enough to make Krennic suspect Galen. So he grabs a couple of Death Troopers and heads for Edu as well.